And we found that 84% of respondents have participated both online and face-to-face at some point. So most people are engaging you in both ways at different times. 14% have only participated face-to-face, however. And this is worth noting because, again, this could be a group that you need to make sure you're staying connected with because of traffic, car troubles, schedules, illness. Many reasons might keep someone from attending in person. And if one of these 14% is going through something like that, you may have to work extra hard to help them stay connected. It could be worth seeing if they would like some hands-on assistance too in learning how to connect through Zoom. You don't have a large body of folks who never have attended in person. Some congregations do, but you do have 2% who have only participated online that took your survey. And that means that they found you somehow and have been plugging in online, but have never been to your building. So about 3 people. That's exciting. See something in the chat. Somebody says they wish they could come in person, but they don't currently have a car. That happens very often. In the past year, we wanted to know how people are engaging most recently. And we found that, again, you're largely a face-to-face congregation. 79% are primarily engaging face-to-face in this last year. However, the group of people who are most often connecting online is not insignificant. It's 17.46%, so 33 folks. Again, those folks may be challenged sometimes to stay connected in a different way. So if they're only participating online most of the time, they may feel like they don't get that chat feeling or that fellowship feeling, and it may be worth figuring out how you can do things like that with those folks. So I only highlight all these to point out that there are different groups and they may have different levels of connectivity. And we want to make sure everyone is able to be deeply connected with every congregation they invest in. All right. You guys were strong in so many areas. The survey respondents shared their ranking of different things about your congregation, from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. And these folks either somewhat agreed or strongly agreed or marked it true rather than false on all of these things. 91% are excited about where the church is headed. This is up from 85% who would have said they were excited 5 years ago. So the pandemic did not send your optimism on a downward slope as it did in some cases. In fact, people are more optimistic now. And then we found that over 90% of respondents believe that your congregation is working for social justice, holds strong beliefs and values, supports vibrant ministries, has a building and parking that are easy for people to find, successfully engages people of all ages, is spiritually vital and alive, has a clear mission and purpose, is a source of learning for adults, children, and youth, builds relationships among members, has worship that inspires awe, engages all the senses, and makes them think. I just caught a glimpse of that this morning, and it was wonderful. Embraces differences of opinion and belief, and invites all members into decision-making. So you can see that you guys have some real strengths to continue to build on, and kudos for that. We wanted to know if people think your congregation is growing or shrinking. We asked this question because it can also affect optimism and things like that. Well, the majority believe your congregation is growing. And based on the newer folks taking your survey, I can say that you are adding folks year over year. Some folks thought you were staying about the same. Now, that definitely could have to do with the fact that essentially your attendance is the same as it was before the pandemic, even though there was a dip in the middle there. A few people do believe that your congregation is shrinking, and this could be because in the building, the crowd may be a little smaller since more people are connecting digitally these days. You guys are also very good at empowering your participants. We found that 86% of respondents say if they have an idea for a way to minister in the world, do good things in the world, that your congregation helps them make it happen. That is amazing. 66% say that when a new person is present at worship, they feel empowered and make a point to speak to them. 84% say your congregation is changing your community. So they believe that you are not only empowering each person, but as a group are making a difference. 78% say that members of the greater community are in your building on a regular basis. So you're helping them do the things they want to do in your building. 90% believe you work with other organizations to achieve goals. 86% say their spiritual life is very important to them. And 98% say your congregation empowers members to do ministry in the world. So you're very high on the areas of empowering your participants. Your welcome was also ranked highly, with 96% saying you want to be racially and culturally diverse, 98% saying you want more members and active participants, 95% saying you're welcoming to people of all races, 100% to all people of all sexualities and genders, 96% welcoming and accessible to people with disabilities. I noticed some ramps. That's wonderful. 80% said it was easy for new people to join existing groups, and 80% say you love the enthusiasm of new people with new ideas. One small note, again, not a minority, but maybe a growing area. So a majority of 66% said that they make it a point to speak to people in worship. This could be higher. We see it higher in some very friendly congregations. And so it might be worth just making sure people feel comfortable. If they're not shy, it's if they're shy, that's fine. But for those who do like to meet new people, making sure they feel comfortable with how to answer the questions of newcomers or inviting them to a coffee or something like that. Maybe a little training in that area even. So here were our free answers, meaning people could write comments. Some wrote paragraphs, some wrote a phrase, but we asked how people came to be involved with the congregation. Most commonly mentioned were people moving to the area and seeking a UU congregation. Those who didn't mention a UU congregation in particular often mentioned your values as being the thing they were searching for. So even if they didn't know the name UU, they found you because your values were aligned with their own spiritual values. Then we wanted to know what keeps people involved, and we found that your community impact and the people in your community, so both, were mentioned the most often. And so that means the impact you're having on the community surrounding your building, the community of Eugene, the neighborhoods around you, but also this community you guys have built of relationships together. And so people continue to stay engaged because they feel that that is so important to them that they're willing to commit their time, their energy, their money to these wonderful strengths. We also asked, when people think about the next 2 years, what do they hope that you all will have been able to do together? There were several things here. Growing even stronger in relationships within that congregational community, so those who gather together, increasing that community impact, meaning outside your walls, growing your number of participants, and deepening in spiritual life. So those were some of the dreams that people had for your congregation. And we'll talk more in the recommendation section on how you might become a part of making those dreams a reality. We also asked what people see or sense could hold them back hold you all back as a congregation. And we found that the largest concern were the congregational finances, followed by the word people, congregate members. But let me point out, that did not mean, when reading the comments, that the people were the problem. Folks were concerned that you needed more people to do all the things that you would like to do, all the spiritual development, all the community impact. There were concerns in the comments that members and staff may burn out because you're doing so much with the amount of people you have, which, by the way, is larger than the average congregation in the United States today. Average Sunday attendance is 65 these days. So you guys are not tiny, but people were concerned that for all the things you want to do, that you may not have enough people and you may not have enough money. One thing we look at when we're assessing a congregation's vitality are their change skills. We find that the world is ever changing, and it is important for a congregation to be skilled in change to navigate those waters. Your congregation scored fairly high on change skills. 83% say that you embrace change, 91% that you do new things in worship often and regularly, 83% that you frequently talk about change, 80% that the members are willing to change in order to achieve shared goals. A couple were a little lower than we might like to see. So 69% said new ideas are welcome, and 67% that members are always willing to try something new. So those are a majority, but it's more like 2/3, which means a third or so disagreed with that statement. Also, 59%, a slight majority, said the congregation is more comfortable when things remain the same. And we all have to work on this within ourselves in life. Change is always uncomfortable, even a good change, even a very welcome change. And so we have to work on learning skills to navigate change in ways that grow us spiritually and personally, because that is one of the ways that we find our way to truth and insight. Some commenters saw your change skills as something that might hold you back. There were a few comments about some folks liking things to stay the way they are, or preferring sort of a sense of being nice over the discomfort of change. Maybe you guys take a long time to discuss things, which is wonderful. And if you take our healthy communications course, we find that for some issues, certainly a long season of listening sessions and discussions is appropriate. For other topics, it may be that moving to action quicker could help you make a greater impact. And then we also saw a few people saying there was some fear, resistance to change. We've always done it this way. This is not uncommon in any congregation. And again, this was not severe, but I'll have a few recommendations on how you might want to brush up or strengthen that area a little to navigate whatever changing waters are ahead. Another aspect we find helpful to congregational vitality are spiritual practices. And in particular, we find that congregations with a deep well of spiritual practice, and this does not have to be Christian spiritual practice in any way, but just a sort of common feeling that they are committed to doing something to deepen their spiritual lives, navigate those waters I was talking about a little more skillfully. They have sort of a center to draw upon when things get tough. And we found that in your congregation, the most common spiritual practices are individual meditation, prayer, or devotions, followed by exploring timely topics, group practices, and group study. However, the only one we would say is practiced really regularly would be that individual meditation, prayer, or devotions. A particular kind of spiritual practice that often helps groups navigate change together is doing group spiritual practice. And this can be anything from an all-church book study to agreeing to take 10 minutes to meditate and give positive energy at a particular time of the week. Many different things can be in this category. But for some reason, when a whole group of people are doing the same thing regularly, it really does provide a buffer for harder times as you navigate change and new things and the future. Your facilities were seen as in excellent condition, primarily. Most said they were appropriate size. A few said they might even be too small, and that's a wonderful problem to have. We wanted to know how your folks are hearing about your activities, because part of being vital is participating. And if we don't know what's going on, we can't plug in. We found that for your regular folks who took the survey, and 166 people answered this question, so that was a good majority of it there. Email and announcements were the main way they were finding out about these things. And we know that the survey link went out through email, and so that's likely a way that many people found the survey itself. Announcements and talking to others, these sort of face-to-face things, were also ranked highly. Well, that could present a challenge for those who are new or not as connected to your community, because maybe they're not present as much, or maybe they're not on the email list yet. So this gives you an opportunity to begin to customize things that are more for newcomers or those who are less connected, such as your website and your Facebook, to make sure they are very newcomer friendly, because folks who aren't yet on your email list or aren't yet talking to friends about what's going on up at the UU congregation, they might need easily accessible, easily understandable instructions for what you're doing, the impact you're making, and how to plug in. So here we get to your financials. We know that that was a concern of many people. we found that like almost every congregation we work with right now, in fact, I can't think of one this year that didn't have this challenge. Your budget is larger than your giving. You're filling some of that, almost $100,000, with some other income. That also is common among congregations these days. You do not have a large endowment, reserve, or restricted fund, according to the questions we asked the leaders about your congregation. We see that your giving has increased since 2018. So has your budget. Your giving seems to have increased a little more than your budget, but there's still a gap. And so what we want to talk about is how that affects congregational vitality. So there are two things that go on. First, they can affect congregational optimism. If people are very concerned about finances, they can become hesitant to invest time, energy, and money. Most respondents did see your finances as tight or in some difficulty. And the percentage that would have said they're in good condition has gone down. So people are aware that things are tight. However, what I found was your giving levels per person are very healthy for a congregation of your size. The national average giving level is about $2,250 per person per year. So when I took your number of folks, it feels like you are getting healthy giving from your folks. So maybe people can't even give more than they're already giving who are connected to your congregation already. This means that the gap may need to be further filled with other income sources, or you may need to invite those in the community who support the impact you're making to invest, even though they may not be interested in Sunday morning gatherings. Many people these days are not, but many people will invest in the impact they want to see in the world. And there'll be a little more on this in the recommendations section as well. Conflict can often impair congregational vitality. What we found is that 62% said that you have had some conflict in your congregation. Conflict is healthy. Disagreement is healthy. So that's not a concern, and particularly not a concern in your congregation, because 68% said it was easily reconciled or resolved, and another 26% that you worked through it together. Only 2 or 3 comments relating to conflict, and those mention things that are common but can be unhealthy, like triangulation, criticism, problematic behavior. So you may have a few people who still have, unfortunately, a few unhealthy or conflict habits, maybe only 1 or 2 folks. But if they are persistent, this may create an avoidance of hard decision or a resistance to change because people don't want to upset anyone. Now, your most common responses to conflict are to negotiate to reach solutions, which is super healthy, or defer to congregational leadership. Also a healthy response. Can be a big burden for leadership to carry, but it is healthy. 61% of your folks have had some training in healthy ways to communicate. So if you do have a few folks who still are challenged to perhaps be persistent in some triangulation or even bullying behaviors, this could include anonymous letters. It could include trying to build a faction about a decision. It could include threatening to leave or take money away from the congregation. These kinds of things can often be addressed through a training or just through some frank and friendly conversations where you say to your neighbor at church, friend, we've agreed to communicate with each other in very healthy ways here. So we're not going to go behind somebody's back and talk about them without them, but I'm happy to go with you if you want to talk to anybody about anything, those kind of things. And the training can help you learn those scripts. Because a 40+% had not received any training. So 60-ish have, but let's get back a slide. Let me remember my percentage. So 61% have had some training, but that means 39% have not. And so maybe the folks who've been trained could train others, or maybe a refresher for everyone is in order. The truth is, navigating change and the future of any congregation is going to involve things we disagree on. Our challenge is just to do so in love and find our ways to the best decision possible, which we need diverse voices to get there, to do so without harming each other in any way. And you guys were not showing danger signs here. I just wanted to mention it because it can present a challenge when congregations don't get this right. Now, You guys are doing so much in the community. I just want to highlight for your size, for any congregation, honestly, your impact is oversized. So you're working in areas, the congregational priorities are food justice, trans justice, and climate justice. And about 100 congregational participants connected with these issues in 2023. But not just limited to those issues, we found that 126 survey respondents reported volunteering over 9,750 hours in your congregational life. So this would be congregational activities and programs in the past 12 months. Some might be for social impact, but they would be led by your congregation or sponsored by or organized by. Now, 112 of your survey respondents reported, this is amazing, over 11,000 hours volunteering in the community outside of congregational activities. So if you are having trouble occasionally getting people to sign up for things, well, they are very busy and they may be exhausted because they're doing so many good things. That means it might be a challenge to do more good things as a congregation. But it's an amazing thing to see. You have 92 respondents who made over 3,350 contacts with their elected officials. 102 respondents attended over 1,800 hours of learning about issues facing your community. And then as a congregation, you were collaborating, you were creating, advocating for policies and programs, providing support, education, interfaith, intercultural experiences. Your work helped 1,200 individuals beyond your own congregational participants. Again, amazing, worth celebrating at every turn. You participated in 4 public actions. 6% of the congregational budget went to external organizations, and you were constantly preaching sermons and teaching about social justice issues as a congregation. Now, who are these folks that are in your greater community that your work might be helping and impacting? We found that your city is a largely progressive community. You probably know this. You live there. I have only driven through there, but you are growing as a community in population size. Households are increasing, and households are also increasing in size due to additional children. The fastest growing age groups in your city are 5 to 17 and over 65. And so what you can see is that your community has one of the things that many congregations say they would love to have, and that is families with children near their congregation. You do have that. That's no guarantee they were interested in being a part of a congregation, and we'll talk about that. But your community surrounding your congregation is somewhat racially diverse, diverse in income levels. There are income inequalities along racial lines. And when I zoomed in and looked at the neighborhoods closest to your building, the residents are even younger than Eugene as a whole. Under 18 age groups are growing faster than older adults. Those in nearer neighborhoods are more likely to be highly educated, but more likely to have lower incomes than the city as a whole. And this may have to do with their youth. Our Mission Insight, which is our demographic program, gives groups of people these catchy names. And the one given to the largest group in the city as a whole and in the neighborhoods near your building are called singles and starters. And this group of folks are young, just getting started out, often in their career, often unmarried. They may live in apartments. They may roommate, bunk up with roommates. Closer to your building, there are even more of these singles and starters than in Eugene as a whole. But other significant segments do include older adults, of whom I know that you guys will have much in common with because of your congregational age demographics, but also a small segment of younger families. And they might be somebody who is interested in a place with your values, if not to attend Sunday gatherings, but maybe to participate in your work in the community. And let's learn about why they might be interested in that. So your neighbors have a lot of strong beliefs that align with UU values. They strongly believe that God is the realization of human potential. They believe that tolerance is necessary, that climate change is real and people must be good stewards of the environment, and that diversity and justice are worth embracing and working toward. So those are very much in line with your congregational values as well. So you guys have a lot in common. You should go to coffee together. However, only 35% of your neighbors are involved in a religious congregation or community, and this is projected to decline further over time. I'm seeing this in all places. Less than half and usually less than 40% are involved in a congregation or community. I'm seeing this from rural Iowa all the way to the big city. So this is an American reality these days. Now, only 0.3% of your neighbors identify as UU, but this has actually increased over the past 10 years. Now, that doesn't mean they attend a UU congregation. However, it does mean they know enough about it to claim it as an identity. We do find, though, that 24% of your neighbors identify as no religious preference, 0.7% identify as spiritual but not religious, 0.3% identify as Wiccan, which is also a growing segment. So those groups we do find in UU congregations. I mean, certainly very, small percentages would want a congregational life because that's true of America today. However, they are kindred spirits in a way with your congregation. And so again, you might consider how you would invite them to help you with the work, or how you might come alongside them in the work of impacting and making your community better, even if they're not really interested in a spiritual community at this time. Their top concerns in recent years include what I'm sure are some of yours: social and political tensions and discord, finances, racism, racial injustice, fear of the future, and health crisis illness. I do all this just to highlight how much you do have in common with your neighbors. And again, it feels like a match made in heaven for you guys to get to know all these folks and see what they need and what they're up to. So we want to know, to compare with neighborhood demographics, but to also make sure we got a good sample on the survey, some demographics about your survey takers. And we compared these with the demographics of your congregation. So we feel like this is fairly representative. Of course, small children couldn't take the survey. But we did find that we had 2% of survey takers under 18. And what a gift that is to have those younger voices. 1% 18 to 25, 2% 26 to 34, 15% 35 to 50. And then the largest groups were 20% 51 to 65, 48% 66 to 80, and 12% over 80. So the survey was skewing slightly older than your congregation as a whole, but not enough so to alter the data. And you do, like many congregations these days, have a significant set of wise folks, and that is a gift both to your congregation and the community. Sometimes a congregation that is aging can find some anxiety around that and tell stories to themselves around that being a critical problem. Like size, we have seen congregations of all age ranges thrive and be vital. And wisdom is never a bad thing. We asked what race, ethnicity people identified with, and we found that 94% of your respondents identified as white, non-Hispanic, 3% Hispanic, 2% American Indian, 1% multiple ethnicity other, and 0% Black. This means your congregation is less racially diverse than your community. So you may have to work hard to make sure you are hearing all voices in your discernment about community programming and social justice if you don't have folks from every segment in your congregation. You're a very highly educated congregation. This is very typical of a UU congregation. Of course, the majority had attended at least some graduate school, with almost half completing it. So you guys have that, and that makes you a little more likely to be postgraduate educated than your surrounding neighborhoods, but those folks are still fairly young. So that doesn't mean they're not headed that way themselves. We wanted to make sure we captured some voices of households with children, and we did. 16% of our survey takers had children in their household, and 64% of their households contained adults over 65. So we did get a sample of both your oldest folks and your youngest folks. We also asked how people would identify themselves, and we found that 70% of respondents identified as heterosexual, 2% as gay, 4% as lesbian, 12% as bisexual, 2% as asexual, 6% as queer, and 6% as other. This makes you more diverse in this area than most American congregations, but also reflective of a fairly diverse and progressive community that you live in. And finally, the gender question, would you identify as, we found that 29% identified as male, 65% as female, 2% as transgender, 1% as gender nonconforming, and 2% as other. Of course, we recognize that these don't capture all the possible wonderful dimensions of human identity. We structure our questions based on some of the census questions. You may be surprised to find the ratio of male to female, but that is typical in an American congregation today, particularly in mainline Protestantism, which UU tends to mirror demographically. 26% identify as a person with a disability or other chronic condition, which is why it was so good to read about your accessibility and welcome. Now, your congregation is mixed in income, certainly actually leaning toward the lower end of the income scale, but that is a very close match for your community as a whole. So it's just one more thing that you guys have in common with your neighbors. You're not out of place, as for example, a very wealthy congregation might be in that neighborhood. Okay. I know it's a lot. I've been talking forever, but here are a few recommendations, and you guys can work as a congregation and team to think through these as we go on with our work together. But just to give you a brief overview of those, some of our recommendations I've already touched on: embracing change, making sure that you're not spending too much time working on decisions in a way that stalls out impact that you might make, being experimental, trying things for a season or a year to build those change muscles. Change skills are like a muscle. You have to use it to build it. And so doing new things and talking about why you do new things frequently, that it is an important skill for any congregation to have. We recommend that highly. Try to be permission giving instead of gatekeeping in terms of new ideas. Empower folks to try something for a while. Let's see how it goes. Let's collect some data on it. And then if there are some folks who occasionally practice an unhealthy behavior that blocks change, you may want to have a conversation or brush up on your healthy communication skills. We heard that your folks would love stronger relationships with each other. And we know that the need to know and be known is universal. Not just the folks in your building, but everyone in your community longs for this. We all do as human beings. However, you're already doing a lot. Your people are stretched very thin, volunteering in congregation and community. So for this area, we would recommend, rather than adding anything new, you may want to examine how every existing activity could build relationships. So a time of reflection built into each congregational activity, whether that's a meeting or a fellowship potluck, making sure you're just checking in with what's weighing on each person's heart and how you can support one another. So you become a community of true mutuality through the time you spend together. We talked about finances, so be creative about your budget. And so one thing you could do is really become mission aligned with that budget and make sure that in terms of budgeting, not only money, but human energy and time, because you only have so many people, that you are focusing all of that on the most important areas for you to impact, and you would discern that together. And then that might mean you streamline some other things. Those could be some budget lines, or it could be some meetings that you're having that are using up people's time, but that aren't focused on impact. It could even be a program of the church that it's time to pause or sunset, so that everybody's energy and gifts and time can be focused on the areas where you most want to make impact. You also could look into entrepreneurial use of your current resources, which might be your building, other assets you may have, to shore up your financial picture. Some congregations have spun off a nonprofit space sharing or a nonprofit coffee shop, or very innovative things, built senior housing so that it's an income generator, but also a social service, low income housing. Things like this can really stabilize a congregational's budget while also making that impact that you long to see, so that you're not just using your assets to keep your lights on, you're using them to make that impact that you're already making even bigger. Finally, not finally, there's three more, but on that line, celebrate your impact. I was so impressed with the things you're doing, and compared with many of the congregations I work with, you are doing amazing things. Not everyone believes that your congregation is changing your community. Well, you can change that by keeping this celebration of your impact in front of everyone all the time. Do it creatively. Do it through worship. Do it through printed communications, through emailed communications, through art, through poetry, whatever you need to do to make sure everyone knows the impact you are making. Do it outside of your congregation in local newsletters or blogs or with banners on the outside of your building or presenting to another local organization about what you're doing. This positions you then to ask for financial support, not only from your folks to give to that impact, because you guys are already giving a lot individually, but your neighbors might be moved to give to that impact. You can't ask unless you tell them what you're about and what you're up to. And so celebrating this publicly and often will put you in a better position to generate support, not only financially, but also volunteers and other folks that want to help. That leads to the next thing. Know your neighbors. How well do you know them? How well do you know how they get their news? How well do you know their needs? What they would love for somebody to come alongside and support? What impact they would love to see in their community? And what would help them thrive and build the world they want to see? Community interviews are one way, but not the only way to find this out. Once you know, you can use that in your discernment about your mission and your goals. And finally, partnerships will be key. You are larger than the average American congregation. However, as we know these days, it takes a lot of people and money and time to make the big impacts our society needs. And so you will do well to find every single partner you can. You have some already. There may be other UU congregations that you could partner with so that they could be in support of you, at least in spirit, and you could, in exchange, support them through some of the things that you can do due to your larger size. I'll give you an example. A UU congregation I participate with sometimes in Valdosta, Georgia, is about 25 people. And through the pandemic, they developed a partnership with the one in Gainesville, Florida, because they were doing Zoom worship. And so the folks from Valdosta would not have to invent a whole Zoom worship. There may be other UU congregations in Oregon who need what you have to offer, and then they might could plug into the impact that you're making as well. And not limited to UU, there are many progressive congregations and organizations in Eugene. And so all of them are largely in some of the same boats that you are, wanting to do a lot, doing a lot, finding that it's hard to do so much with the people they have, and longing to partner so that you can all make a greater impact. So that was a mouthful. I hope I have not made your head spin. I have taken this away so I can hopefully be seen a little bigger. And I am happy to answer questions or whatever you guys envision for the rest of our time together today.
Yes, so we're ready for a conversation with you. Thank you very much, Anna. Any comments, questions, wonderings, surprises? Can we appreciate what we've seen so far?
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we're celebrating, right? Yes, thank you, Jean Marie. Did you have something?
I really appreciated kind of thinking about the other ways to incorporate learning, because we are very busy people. And I know, we've tried to do workshops and things like that, and folks have so many things going on. And I'm excited about having conversations at a congregation about how we can support each other and delving more into some of the tougher issues together in a way that's accessible and doable for folks.
And the slides are going to be available along with the recording of this session. So Kat, you and I will talk about how to get that to all of the people. We've got a few more questions.
I'm really intrigued about the community conversations and finding more out about our immediate neighbors. And I just think that there's so much potential in terms of aligning on issues that we might not be identifying inside our congregation, but are really important to people who live next door. So I think I'm really intrigued about expanding those opportunities.
Hi, my name is Bob. Couple of one question and then comment. I'll first piggyback on the lady's comment about partnering with other work in the community and getting to know our neighbors better. And I was thinking about the neighborhood associations that are very well organized and have a legacy in this community. I think you know the Jefferson neighborhood. I don't know which one we're closest to, but it would make sense if we could find ways to engage with existing neighborhood associations to learn more about our community and also to partner with them on their work. And then the second thing was there was some information you gave about, I think it was in terms of spirituality, and you were describing the various spiritual practices of the community. And I don't know if it was the way the question was stated in the survey, but it seemed like there was something missing, because for me, a lot of the spiritual practice I engage in on a regular basis is with you all on Sunday mornings. So I felt I was missing. I don't know, maybe I didn't hear it, but that was just a question I had.
No, I understand completely. Yes, when we ask that question, we're trying to ask what people are doing on their own. I mean, because we sort of assume that we have been provided with information about your shared spiritual practice there and worship. And so, yes, that wasn't an option on that question. And so it was more about what you do in your own time. And so when we talk about adding more group spiritual practices, we mean in addition to the time that you spend together on Sunday morning. So maybe, again, not necessarily in person, but maybe just something where everybody picks a time of day and says, we're going to light a candle in our home at this time of day to help us see insights into our community and congregation, or a book study. Just so a lot of people are doing the same thing at the same time, not just your Sunday gathering. We don't know why it works, but we do find that the more that stuff happens, or even the prayer and reflection built into meetings that you're already having, it does seem to buffer a congregation from some of the twists and turns that congregational life can hold. It's one of those mysterious things, but adding one more thing in addition to the gatherings on Sunday or whenever, that does seem to help. And that's why we don't ask about it in that particular question, but we do honor the things you do together. And I loved being able to glimpse a little of it this morning.
Just for your information, we sit right at the border of the Jefferson West Side neighborhood and the far west neighborhood. We've got a lot of opportunity. And on the 25th of June, a bunch of volunteers are going to the Jefferson West Side annual picnic, and we're going to have a booth there for our church.
That is so cool. What a great opportunity, too. One thing that I have found working with congregations, and I'm sure Cameron has mentioned some of this, is that even at an event like that, just asking people who come up to your booth, what is your greatest dream for Eugene? Nothing about spiritual community, nothing about congregations, but literally just what is your greatest dream for this geographical area or for your neighborhood of Jefferson? Like, where are you dreaming these days? And you can learn so much. So I'm excited for you. That'll be fun.
Yeah, I just have a clarification. Did you actually do a survey of our neighbors? And I wondered where you got the information that showed how similar we were to them. It's very intriguing about interacting more with our neighborhood to me. So could you answer about the survey? And what was your sample size and how did you do it? Did you do it in person or by phone or email, or how did you get the information?
So I do not do those surveys in person myself. We contract with an organization, and it's called Mission Insight, and they do several things. So they pull from the census data, which is as many people as were in the census tracts, and there are certain things, age, race, those things that are in our census data. They also pull, and this is it can almost make you uncomfortable. They pull from consumer reporting data. So all of our financial data is logged by our zip code, and that is not always the most comfortable thing. I will tell you, you can actually buy a package where I can zoom in on your house and tell things about you. And I don't know even how I feel about that. But the data is very granular that we get from the consumer reporting industry. And then finally, the American Belief Study is conducted by Mission Insight every 4 years. And so the last one they did was in 2021. So we're a little bit still in a place of uncertainty about how that data is going to slope coming out of the pandemic, because we have a mid-pandemic, we have one before. So they're doing it this year, late 24, 25. And then we'll have a new survey on the religious affiliations and beliefs and preferences and values of your neighbors. So, but it is asked through both surveys, like, I did, but with the larger group of people where they do the calling or the emailing to try to capture a sample of your neighborhood. And then finally, those big picture things like census and consumer reporting where they actually know each household. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. All the reports are going to be in a folder that your team can share, and you can see both the reports, and in the reports, it tells you where to click through to find out if you want to dive deep, because I'm a research nerd, if you want to dive deep into how all this comes together, you are invited to, because it is fascinating and helpful, and also a little unnerving how much they know.
Let me go over here.
Hi, I'm Martha. I'm going to be at that Tuesday night meeting for the Neighborhood Association. I'm really kind of excited to be behind that table to be able to speak about the church. I'm somewhat concerned, and I was going to talk to Rev Jen afterwards, as to what kind of publications we are likely to be able to hand out. I need to have an elevator conversation ready, because you can just bore somebody right off the bat if you don't have the right words to capture questions. I've lived in this neighborhood for about 50% of my life, and I'm also very excited about the building of housing across the street from us, which I see there is movement there. They're busy getting ready to make a big hole pretty soon. So I feel really positive about those things in particular.
Yeah, I think that sounds so exciting. And I know you guys have also your team has generated a list of community leaders to interview and all of this. And elevator speeches are good. And I will encourage you at this point to really just focus on listening. Well, number one, most people want nothing more in the world than to be listened to. So if you tell them nothing except the name of your congregation, but ask them about their lives, you've probably made a friend for life right there. Number two, as these interviews and encounters start to become data, because you guys, I know you have a team that's working on this, when you do find that focus, that mission impact area where you're like, we can't do everything. So this is where we're going to focus for 2025 or whatever. That's going to give you your elevator speech. And that's the great thing about that, because once you have that impact statement, we are a congregation that does X for our neighbors. Well, gosh, now you have it. You don't have to come up with it. So I would say don't stress too much. Spend some time just listening this time and telling them where you're from. And that elevator statement will become clear out of your work with Cameron and with the community interviews and with these encounters like at the event.
Thank you.
I'm a research nerd as well. I have a PhD in human physiology, and I've had to deal with numbers a lot. And I wanted to say that your numbers back us up. The things that I have learned by being in this congregation for not quite a year and attending the transformational leadership training is that we are aiming in the direction that you tell us where to aim, and I like it that the numbers are backing us up. Numbers that we took ourselves when we all took these surveys, and they're backing us up. So I think we have a shot at doing what she has suggested and following what Rev Jen has told me and what the leadership committee has told me and trained me to do. So thank you all very much.
Yes, I get to read you all back to yourselves. I mean, what a gift. You've told me these wonderful things and I just get to celebrate them with you. So what a gift.
Sue Craig, I'm coming to you.
Okay, I have two comments. Was it Judy that asked how you can get this information about the demographics in our communities here in our neighborhoods. And I hate to tell you, but it's all online. You get into the neighborhood and they give you a lot of that information. I can remember looking this up and finding that one of the neighborhoods that we're close to is very active, and the other one, when I looked it up, had basically kind of dissolved. They weren't working at all, and I don't know where that is now. I haven't looked that up for a long time. What I am finding is that in this congregation, we have been working for years in the community with so many different things. But what is happening is we have this wonderful Rev. Jen who has broadened our views. It's just amazing what she has helped us look at and become a part of, and kind of changing our whole viewpoint. It's been wonderful, and we're so thankful to have her.
Hi, I'm Lacey. I just wanted to introduce myself. Just a little surprise. I went to Sunset International Bible Academy, and I did some ministry work there and learned how to do missionary work. I'm no longer affiliated with any type of congregation, but it is a passion of mine. I'm studying to discipline myself to become a better life coach. I'm very interested in being maybe a lay minister. I haven't placed a membership here yet, but I have been attending here since September. So I really look forward to this, getting to know everybody and maybe learning how I can help out with the congregation in doing ministry.
Anybody else? Question, comment? Ooh. Okay, so we'll go this side first, and then we'll go to you.
Hi, my name is Susan. When we moved into this building 10 years ago, we had an intern named Kimberly. And Kimberly said, we're going to go discover the neighborhood. And we did a neighborhood walk. And I remember thinking, well, that's maybe not the most logical way to go about, but, you know, buy the building, fix up the building, and so on, and then discover the neighborhood. But that's the way life sometimes works. And it was really kind of eye-opening because we'd been in a kind of affluent part of Eugene that was quite difficult to get to. You really had to have a car. And one of the things that the congregation wanted was to be on a bus line. And we are on a bus line, and that does help quite a bit. But I'm also excited by the idea of getting more involved with the neighborhood, and we could do like in the summer, we could do a pop-up ice cream social, or we could just, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you could do. But as long as you're friendly and you listen and you don't proselytize, which we're not prone to anyway, then, and you feed people, that's usually a good way to get through to them. But I did like the idea of the neighborhood walk, and I think that maybe should be not a procession, but just something that we do every once in a while, because it is eye-opening. Many of us come and go by car, and we don't really dip into the neighborhood too much. And that's just my observation, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Yes, we have a handout that we often share with consulting clients to do a little walk around. You never know what you'll see or who you'll meet. It's never a bad thing to take a little group from the church and just have a nice walk.
My name's Adele, and I wanted to go back to the whole thing about the neighborhood, doing the Jefferson neighborhood. And we live right on the outskirts of the friendly neighborhood, and we went to a friendly get-together, potluck party type thing last year at Washington Park, and they had all kinds of booths and performances, and I felt like that would be, I don't know what the Jefferson neighborhood has done, but that would be another neighborhood to contact. The park is only 1.5 miles from here, and part of the friendly neighborhood is even closer. But I just wanted to put that idea out there because I think that would be they're a real friendly bunch. We've gone for walks in that neighborhood, and be a good choice to check into as well. And thank you for all the work that you all have done.
Oh, are there any questions on the Zoom chat?
Not at this point.
I saw.
Eugene's kind of funny. It took me a while to understand that the neighborhood the neighborhood organizations do not represent neighborhoods. They represent a large chunk of property. I mean, the neighborhood, the friendly neighborhood, which I used to live in, it extends from what really is one neighborhood called Southtown, if you pay attention to. Most neighborhoods are at intersections. And in Eugene, the neighborhood associations are not in intersections. West Side neighborhood includes a lot of what's called the WIT, Whitaker neighborhood. It's confusing. So I think maybe when we talk about neighborhoods, we may want to redefine our neighborhood.
Yeah, it can be so challenging to define a congregational neighborhood. So I'll tell you what I did for the assessment. I did the whole city of Eugene, and then I did a smaller area, but I was just taking a educated guess, you might say. Again, they're in a folder that your team folks will have. However, we are able to run more. So if you find, it's no trouble, if you find that those geographical boundaries are not the right ones for your congregation, if you wanted to loop in another one or cut it a little smaller, I am happy to do that at any time. So you can just your team can follow up with me if you guys want some different geography to really zoom in. Okay, I see stuff in the chat there.
And there was a prompt from the group. If there's anything in the chat you wanted to share with all of us.
Okay, I see somebody shared that Ryan organized some Saturday walks around neighborhoods to pick up for cleanup. I assume picking up trash. That would be a nice way to make acquaintance with neighborhood, and nice if we could do it at different times for those who can't do Saturday mornings. Well, what a great service and a great way to do a neighborhood walk. That sounds fantastic.
Would you be willing to tell us a little bit more about the September Future Labs?
I can, experience? Yeah. I don't lead that, but I've been through it with Cameron and helped her many times. So futuring is an interesting experiment that Cameron learned and was trained in by people who work with the United Nations. And the reason people are doing this more and more in the nonprofit and NGO spaces is because we often just continue doing what we're doing based on the idea that the future will be just like the present. As we've seen with the pandemic, with technology and everything else, this can be a very wrong assumption, especially when we're looking out 20, 25 years. And so the Futuring Workshop is an imagination space. It teaches us to begin to cast our imagination farther into the future, literally by asking, what do you think the world will realistically be like in even 70 years? What do you think spirituality will be like in 70 years? And we begin to work from that to think about what organizations, what practices, what congregations, if there are still congregations, would be what is needed for such a time as that. Because we know we're in this time, but the future may not be like this time. And it's a very structured experience with particular questions and a particular way of brainstorming. But most of all, it is a chance to bring all of our imaginations into our best sort of dreaming for the future. So we're not just assuming everybody will act and experience life the way we do today. It's fun. I'll say that. I've been through several with Cameron. We did one with all these denominational heads from across the United States, like, United Methodist, Episcopalian, Disciples of Christ, so many different ones. And it was fascinating. So I know you'll have a great experience.
Hello, Reverend Anna, and thank you very much for spending your time with us. I have an assortment of very poorly put together comments because they're still sort of half formed. I am in the middle of reading a book right now about divisiveness within a different church tradition and how they are looking at the causes and effects of that. And I'm finding that I'm thinking that this whole question of handling change is something that every congregation, probably of every denomination, is dealing with.
Oh, yes.
And I really want to just hold that as we are considering this data.
Yeah, and every civic organization, honestly. So somebody mentioned that there was one neighborhood association that wasn't really functioning anymore. If we learn good skills for change, we are a gift to every congregation, every workplace, every civil organization, civic organization that we're a part of, simply because the world keeps changing and our old ways of doing things will never be enough to match the new. We have to discern what's needed for now. And so, yeah, I think I don't work with a congregation where it's not an issue. You guys were less of an issue than most. But conflict and change in some congregations are very extreme. And I'm having to do conflict workshops over weeks. And so you guys are doing good, but we can always keep building because you'll be a gift to your community if you are skilled in change, for sure.
Thank you. My second half-formed thought, and this comes actually out of my professional life, is that one of my big hobby horses is the intersection of technology and mission, particularly when it comes to some of the harms that social media has done. And does the technology serve our mission, or is it does it ever hit a point where committing to a particular technology actually detracts from our mission? And that's something I'm really fascinated by.
Great question.
So, thank you.
Yeah, great insight. Great question. We have a digital innovation director here at Convergence, and he teaches all of our courses and manages our online stuff as well, but all of our courses on digital ministry. And he would say exactly what you just said, that you want the tool that is right for the impact you're trying to have, not chasing a trend or chasing what somebody else has. And so if the impact you want to have is to engage more community members in food ministries, for example, what technologies are going to help you reach those people the best? And sometimes it's literally face-to-face, which is still a technology. It's the oldest one in the world. Sometimes it is using a digital tool. But he would say digital is helpful when it's where the people are that you're wanting to reach to join the movement that you're building. And so, yeah, I agree completely. And he would agree even more so. He's the expert in that area.
Thank you so much. Anybody else want to say something? Yeah?
A comment and a shameless plug. So I was happy to see the analysis of how our congregation deals with conflict. I'm a member of CORE. It's our Committee on Right Relations. We help people when they have conflict, if they haven't been able to resolve it on their own. We've actually had several since we started. And so this is just a shameless plug for the work that we do with CORE, and really happy that you have picked up on our congregation's innate ability to address conflict in a respectful way that preserves relationships, and we're continuing in that effort.
Yes, it shows. Wonderful. Good work.
And anybody else? Anna, do you have any any final words you want to say to us?
Well, just that it has been an honor to get to know you guys in this way and to see the wonderful things you're doing in terms of your relationships with each other, your spiritual development, as well as your impact in the community. I don't get to hang out with you churches all the time, but there are some that are very dear to me, including the one, like I mentioned, in Valdosta, where I sometimes preach. And it's tiny, but it is always a gift to be with folks with your values and spirit. And so I sure appreciate the honor to work with you. And if anybody has questions you think of later, just let the team know, and they can let me know. Everybody on the team has my email address and a link to all the data and that kind of stuff. And so keep in touch, and I'll be here. And I know your next step will be meeting with Cameron down the line. So,
all right. Thank you so much, Anna.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
And so I'll send you all off repeating the words of Theodore Parker from this morning. Be ours a religion like sunshine goes everywhere. Its profession of faith, divine living. Go in peace, my friends. Go in love.